Hey, Danny, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. We're on. We're on. This is it. We're
This is
going.
it.
Yeah,
We're live.
just like that. Just like that. How about
Wonder,
that?
wonderful.
So
How are you, Joe?
I'm good. How are you doing, Daniel McMahon, cycling reporter?
Oh boy, that sounds like a lot. I'm, I'm
you
I'm
name
doing
your
pretty.
you name yourself the cycling reporter.
You know, quick backstory on that. I
Uh-huh.
had this blog I wanted to do, which kind of put me on this quote unquote cycling journalism trajectory. But I was in New York, and it was probably around 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and I uh, I was working at This Old House magazine, which was then part of Time Inc., which has since imploded big time. But I was a copy editor at Time This Old House magazine, and my passion was like cycling. I was racing at the time. I had a coach. I was like super into it, but I had nothing to do with journalism. And it was kind of actually a really cool period, like some of my great years, if I can say that. Like I was racing in New York, like Central Park, Prospect Park. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to like the Casino Velodrome. I was going to these crits around town, et cetera, et cetera. It was such a great place to race. It's actually kind of one of the um, it's kind of one of the best places you can race if you're going to have to live in a big American city. But anyway, I started this blog. I just had this kind of writing bug in me, and I kind of wanted to write stuff. And I literally didn't care if anyone read it. I just wanted to like put up a blog. So anyway, I
What
had
year?
this
What
friend.
year? What year was this, Danny? Like what
I'm
years was this?
I'm thinking around 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, and so 2008, 2009-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been right. And anyway, so I had this friend who I had worked for previously. His name was Mickey, an Indian gentleman, and he was a real savvy. Like he was a bit older, and he was really savvy and experienced in like journalism and research, market research, and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I kind of had dinner with him one night. And I'm like, I want to start this blog, and who knows, maybe someday it could actually be, decent and get some traffic. And he knew a lot about SEO and
Mm-hmm.
just all this kind of stuff. And I didn't know much about it, but he taught me a bunch of stuff. And then we brainstormed like an idea, like, for the name and the brand and stuff. And he's like, why don't you call yourself Cycling Reporter? And I was like, oh, like, at first I was like,
Oh.
I'm like, I don't know about that. Like I was thinking about something a little more like not mentioning cycling or reporter
Yeah.
in the title, like something, Um, and so anyway, I went with what he had. I guess I couldn't think of anything better, and
Mm-hmm.
so I went ahead. I went to GoDaddy. I bought the URL. I bought this and that, and um, got a WordPress blog. And my then girlfriend, like she was a graphic designer, she helped me design a really nice original logo and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, slowly but surely, I built up this blog, which eventually got some decent readership. And I was able to sell some advertising to it and that sort of thing. And actually, I think that was a big part of my getting a job at Bicycling Magazine. Because, up until then, I didn't really have anything like in my like writing samples or, I had been teaching mostly up until then, around then. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it's funny you just pointed out Cycling Reporter. So it's this handle that just stuck, and it's really straight and direct, I guess. But I guess it's worked, and I just never, changed it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's straight and to the point, right?
Yeah.
That's what it
So
is.
that's just a little bit of history on that. But I have to just say, like, blogging was really fun because there was no pressure. It was
Mm-hmm.
totally just a hobby, a passion project. And I was basically going to races and some other events, other racing kind of related events, and just like little bike shows and these kinds of things. And I'd occasionally like run across like either virtually or in real life, I'd run across like some pro or ex pro, and I'd be like, hey, would you want to do an interview? And they're like, sure, I love to talk about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I just, I knew how to write and edit at least to a decent level. And I was able to kind of put together some posts. And next thing you know, like my stuff was coming up on Google like a little bit better, and people were kind of reaching out like, "Hey, I saw your blog," and it wasn't anything super crazy, but it was kind of cool, and I kind of caught the bug,
Well,
and that late.
it probably helped a lot to be in New York City too, right? Because you're
Yes,
kind of in the
yes.
epicenter of all of that, especially in 2008, 2009. There was a lot of really cool bike stuff coming out of New York City.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly, exactly. We had Joao Correa.
Mm-hmm.
He was coming back and racing. He was a super interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
And
New,
just there were some great travel teams there that were going around the country doing crits coming back. I think Foundation was one of them. I've
yeah.
actually raced with them as well, not the travel team, but the
Mm-hmm.
local team. And then I got to know like GS Minjoni, like the great team, and obviously Casina was on that club for a while. Anyway, so I like met all these cool, amazing people and learned about the history of. And I can't say enough about like New York City cycling. It's such a thriving. I haven't been in it in a while, but it's such a great place to race. Like we always said, you could race 5 days a week during the racing season and never get in a car,
Wow.
which was largely true because you had Prospect Park, which is like Brooklyn's Central Park. It's almost exactly half the distance
Mm-hmm.
around on the cycling track, running track, and then so Central Park, Prospect Park, and then there was Rockaway, which was just on the Jersey side. You'd cross the Hudson, and then there's a crit there, and then there was Branch Brook, which was like this park in Jersey. They had races there. And then there was the Casino Velodrome, and then oh yeah, Floyd Bennett Field. How could I forget? So the original kind of like I guess one of the first airstrips. So
Mm-hmm.
before JFK, it's literally across the water from JFK. But there's an old abandoned kind of derelict airstrip that they have races on to this day, and they go out and it's pancake flat and it's windy as fuck,
Wow.
and it's like it's kind of like Belgian racing, like just the ferocious crosswinds. Obviously, that's where you want the airport. And I guess I think this is right. Amelia Earhart flew from there.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah, it's called Floyd Bennett Field. It's got a great history if people want to look it up. But I would do the Tuesday night races there. They would have Saturday races there, and it was just hardcore because it was just like some of the best racing. It was supposed to be training races, but often you go home and you look at your power numbers, like it was way harder than the weekend races, the quote unquote real races. Because it was just people going out there. It was a super cheap entry, like $10 or whatever. And you can go home with $100 or something in your pocket if you place. But people race like so hardcore, like even teammates would like just attack each other. And it was just all out. It was just attack after attack after attack. There was no real strategy a lot of times, and it was just big, wide open, windswept, old, and it was just concrete because that's where they had the airport, and it was like all these like weeds growing in between the concrete blocks, and anyway, you can see pictures online, but so much fun, and
And there, and
all I
there,
was doing at these races was like I was just there racing anyway, and then I would
mm-hmm.
just stay after, and I would like take some photos. I'd talk to a couple of people, and then I'd put up a blog post. Next thing I know, like 5,000 people have like looked at this blog post. I'm like,
Wow.
what the hell?
Wow.
And all I did is put up like the results. I took like a simple picture with my phone, and these photos weren't like nice photos. These were photos with my like I guess original iPhone or whatever I had.
Well,
And these were like
that was
grainy.
early days of internet. I remember, yeah, I mean, we did something with the website at Cyclesmithy at the shop I was working at then, and I remember the response was pretty big because there wasn't a lot of people doing that stuff yet, right? That
Right,
citizen
right.
journalism was just kind of it was just starting, right? The blogs
Yes.
were it, Twitter wasn't what it is now. That instantaneous information wasn't. It was the beginning of all of that. So people were the people that were into it were searching it, right? They were looking for that
Yeah,
information.
yeah, exactly. And and it was definitely the web had obviously been around, but like there was great stuff. I'm just looking back, Joe. So a quick note, like that site eventually came down, but it's actually still available, of course, on the Wayback Machine, that site you can go to and see old stuff. Because, as they say, once it's online, it never goes away. But you can go to the Wayback Machine and search CyclingReporter.com. And so the dates I'm seeing are starting as late 2007. So I would say 2009 and 2008, 2009. I'm looking at the posts here. Actually, 2010, sorry. 2010, 2011. That's when I was posting the most. But anyway, I think that's what got me the job at Bicycling, because I think they saw that blog. And again, maybe I'm just flattering myself, but I think they saw, like, if this is just like one man doing this, like this could be great for what we want. That was kind of my interpretation. But nonetheless, I was just taking super basic photos, posting like the most basic race reports, and I couldn't believe the traffic. Like, and the thing is, it's because no one was doing it. Again, this is before Facebook really, I think, was super ubiquitous. And now it's like you can post all this stuff on Facebook in like 2 seconds, and but at the time, this kind of didn't really happen. Plus, I kind of knew racing and I knew the riders, and I can actually maybe make it sound like an intelligible, somewhat nuanced race report. I ended up doing interviews with the local riders, like the more elite riders, and people would eat this up. And it was just because they'd be bored at work and they're like, no one else, they'd go to Cycling News and Velo News and like, no one's writing about their local racing scene. And I was just like, duh, this is the most obvious thing to do. And it was kind of like shoe leather journalism in a sense, but I digress. But those were good years. So. Oh,
that's cool. It's interesting to hear the history of that, because I know you as Danny McMahon, but the Cycling Reporter thing came up later on, and I never really knew the origin story of all of that. I knew you were out there and you were covering the local racing scene out there, so I kind of put 2 and 2 together, but I didn't know exactly, how it had spawned,
Yeah, exactly. That's totally the origin story. So, and I had fun with it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned all the racing over there. And then the I guess the racing that everybody usually hears about is the Central Park races, the races at Central Park. Is that really a thing there, or because you didn't mention those races, I guess?
Yes. So in Central Park, first of all, like, what an iconic place to race. As you know, Joe, because I know you've promoted and you've directed races and all this. Your permits, to get the permits, you got to race really early. So I remember waking up at 4:30, riding my bike over the Brooklyn Bridge, rolling up to Central Park, getting there like at 5:15. The races would start at 5:30, and so it's 5:30 a.m. You got like a coffee or maybe half a donut in you, and then next thing you know, you're sprinting at 190 beats a minute, and things are strung out, and you're like, "What am I doing with my life?"
And this is on the weekends, is Saturday, Sunday type thing, or
exactly. So what they would have is the quote club races. So CRCA, which I believe is the oldest or one of the oldest, organizations for bike racing in the whole United States, goes back, decades, whatever. So CRCA has their teams that are part of the CRCA, and there are a number of teams. And then there are teams that are not club teams. And so the club teams, they race on Saturdays. And so at first I was a member of Casina, and Casina wasn't a member of CRCA. And so I believe they're still not, but I'm not certain on that. It's been a long time. So we could not race there on Saturdays. We would have races in Prospect Park instead. And so we would race in Prospect Park on Saturday. A lot of the club teams for CRCA, they would race in Central Park on Saturday, in Central Park. And then on Sunday, you would get the open races. And so that's CRCA club riders, club teams, and then anyone else who wanted to race, even like individual, what do they call them now? Adventurers, or there's a term I keep seeing online for these guys. But anyway, just like individual, folks without a team. So just like anybody. So the biggest races, the biggest fields, and the most money, prize money, and all that kind of stuff, those were on Sundays. And, they didn't have them every single weekend consistently, but during the season, they were pretty frequent. Prospect Park kind of had like a rival. It generally always like worked out pretty well, but there was basically a quote unquote rival series over in Prospect Park. And Charlie Eisendorf ran that. His father ran the GS Mangione team. I believe his father, or I believe it was his father, but anyway, a connection. So he ran the famed GS Mangione team. And I'll have to fact check on myself on their relationship. But, that was a very like well-known team in New York, and they have that kind of iconic kit and all that. So they had like
George Hincapie came out of that team, right?
Yes, he did. Hincapie was on that. A lot of folks.
Yeah, a lot of pros.
The list is pretty amazing. So yeah, so the flavor was obviously just a little bit different. Central Park I think is almost exactly twice as long. Both parks are relatively flat. They're a tiny bit lumpy with some false flats, but each has like a little bit of a climb. The Harlem Hill, as they call it, at the top of Central Park at 120th Street. That's a little bit, it's not a long climb and it's not super hard, but when you're in a field going up pretty fast, you notice it, but you know what I mean? You're in that draft. Yeah. It doesn't feel super hard as opposed to when you're riding solo, but it makes things possibly a little bit interesting. Maybe once in a while breaks would go from there, but a lot of these races ended in sprints. And then Prospect Park was, it's a little different. It's a shorter track, but has a little bit of a drag of a climb. Nothing super significant. I think I remember just more breakaways staying away in Prospect Park for some reason. But anyway, those were good times, and I still see online like a lot of folks, posting pictures. So the racing there is still thriving, and it's a great scene, man.
Yeah.
It's really fun, and we don't quite have that same thing here in Chicago.
No, we don't. We don't.
There's a couple of crits along the lakefront here and there, and we have the cyclocross series, which is great, but we don't quite have that same thing as New York, which I do regret, but it is what it is.
I tried for a little while. I mean, I tried kind of not necessarily modeled after the Central Park races, but weekly, or at least bi-monthly summer series down on the lakefront, kind of a training series, and it was successful. We had the local club teams would come out and do it. It was held in Soldier Field, around Soldier Field, and and a couple of times when we had some national caliber riders come through. People that were coming through town or happened to be in town for something would come and do it, and it was a fun thing to do, but it was expensive. It was an expensive race. It was an expensive series to put on, and at some point it just kind of faded. I think at the time that we were doing it, there was a lot of interest in racing, and then it just kind of started to die off. I don't know. I think we spoke about it just recently on one of the pods about how the scene right now is just nowhere close to what it was in 2008, 2009. That was around the time when we were doing the series, 2009, 2010, right around there. And because you came in you came in from New York. You were in your Casena kit, I think, and did that, right?
It's funny you're talking about it because, you have a good memory. So, one, kudos for putting that on. I have some sense of how much effort is involved, having worked with promoters and interviewed some of them, including the Red Hook guys and the Prospect Park racing guys, and I got to know them over time. But number two, I came back and raced it twice. The first time in my old Casino kit, I was still racing my old Merlin, and I kind of just slapped my bike together and showed up, and I was just kind of getting back into racing. So that was super fun. I'm sure I got my ass handed to me because that course was so like F1, and it was super technical, had like this one long ass straightaway, and then it was just like crazy technical, like really tight turns, and I just remember being blown like very early and being like, oh my god, this is really hard, because the park races are so there's nothing technical about them whatsoever. It's just long straights and these big gentle like turns, and you're kind of going like 28 the whole time, but like when you're in a pack, it's not really that taxing.
Mm-hmm.
So until you try to break away or something like that, but or you got to close a gap or whatever. But that those crits were a little bit mano a mano. I mean, it's kind of like hang on for dear life and try to keep up. So I appreciated that course for sure. But the second time I came back, I think the next year I was in my foundation kit, and
Mm-hmm.
someone snapped a picture, which I still have. I love it. I was on a borrowed bike, but that was a fun event, and I love that it was just down at Soldier Field along the lakefront. It was really cool, and I was definitely sad when it kind of faded, as you said. But yeah, I mean, at least props to you, and hopefully you have a couple good memories. I remember the field being not huge, but definitely like some legit racers there, and I definitely got my ass handed to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like I said, it was fun. I wanted to try my hand at promoting. I mean, I talked about it a lot, and certainly had my issues with races, and I decided to put my money where my mouth was and do it. I wanted I wanted to experience it, and I also wanted to do something kind of cool. I always thought it would be fun to have a race on the lakefront, and got to do that, and it was fun. It is. There are some fond memories from that event. So.
And it was so cool to come back, Joe. Because I literally was flying into town to see family and friends for like a long weekend, and I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna take my bike. I'm gonna take my bike, man. I'm pro.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it felt kind of cool, but I do remember like showing up and seeing you, and I was like, oh my god, this is it's like so surreal. Like here we are. Too bad you weren't racing it. You were busy promoting and running the race, but like you had Kenny LeBay, the former U.S. Postal, current
oh yeah,
postman,
yeah,
Kenny LeBay on the mic, and I was just like, "This is dope! Like, this is
yeah,
great."
yeah.
Those were fun times. Nice, humid summer weather. Like it
Hmm.
was just just enough light, to get around safely, and it had kind of a cool vibe. It had like a Twilight crit vibe or something. I liked it.
Yeah, we had, and at the time we had friends in the marketing game, and so there was always some sort of brand that was trying to
Hmm.
promote something, and we were able to kind of invite them down to cross promote their brand and give something away. I
Hmm.
remember one day I think we had Pepsi there, and they had brand ambassadors, and we
Nice.
we'd use them as podium girls back when podium girls were okay to have,
I was gonna say back then, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
different times, right? What a flashback.
yeah, yeah, back when it was like, hey, the picture of the triumphant bike racer, and that was a
Yes.
fun thing, and actually it was funny. I did it as a bit of a tribute to the big races, but it
Yeah, of
became it
course.
became a thing where all the local guys really wanted to, they were really trying to get on the podium to get that picture, and it was,
Of
it would
course.
make for some really interesting races at the end of the day. I mean, like people were really going for it, and we had the juniors raced free, so all the kids raced for free, and we
Nice.
got Chipotle to donate free burritos to all the
I
kids.
remember. I remember that. I
Yeah.
remember I remember the Chipotle
Uh
promo
huh.
very specifically. I swear I remember eating a burrito, but I could be making that. But I do remember
Yeah.
Chipotle because I remember it reminded me of the former Chipotle team, the Cannondale team, when
Mm-hmm.
they had Chipotle as a sponsor.
Yeah.
And quick side note, when you saw this back in the day, but like when Zabriskie and all these guys and Vandeveld were racing for Chipotle or Garmin or whatever it was called. That team went through so
Mm-hmm.
many sponsors. But I was fast forward working for bicycling, and so I was at the tour, and we got invited to the rest day in I'm forgetting the town, but south of France, and they had Chipotle burritos for the riders and
Whoa.
all the media. And it was in this like really cool space. I don't know if it was like an old mansion or a chateau, or I can't remember what it was, but I want to say it was an Arles or Avignon or something like that. But I just remember sitting outside. I have a photo somewhere. I was sitting outside on this little at this little table in this beautiful like French town, and I'm sitting there with Dave Zabriskie, and we're just eating Chipotle burritos, and it was so fucking surreal. I'm like, I don't belong here. What am I doing here? But I'm like, I'm in total imposter syndrome, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go with it. And I was actually kind of intimidated to talk to Zabriskie, but I
Mm-hmm.
said something really simple like, "How you feeling?" And he was so cool, and he was like, "Oh, I'm good, man." You know, he was always so funny,
Yeah.
kind of like a surfer dude. He's like, "Oh, it's cool, man. Like, it's all good. We're at the tour, man." And like, he was just so chill. It was like talking to Spicoli, but I just remember that being like amazing. But anyway, the tie into the Chipotle, well, that was cool that you got them. That's a big company, big brand, obviously, especially
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
that was cool. You were able to tie all that in. I mean, to get a podium shot with the girls, would you that would have been one for the ages, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, Chipotle was closely tied to cycling at that time. You're right with Garmin. I actually forgot the Garmin tie-in altogether. You
mm-hmm.
know, I was just thinking about
Mm-hmm.
the race, but that's right. I mean, I think we kind of they had jerseys and they had that kind of stuff because of their tie-in.
The,
So they provided some jerseys and
nice.
yeah, I forgot how I
The
completely forgot how
Argyle,
big. Yeah, how
yeah.
big they were. Yeah, that's right. They had a jersey. I think Garmin had a jersey where the burrito was sticking out the back pocket. It was like part of the.
Yes,
It was like
yes,
part of the
yes.
jersey, right? It was like
Yeah,
printed on the jersey. Yeah,
exactly. It
yeah.
was like the aluminum wrapping or the foil
Mm-hmm.
wrapping sticking out. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Those are good times, man. We're
that
going back in time right now.
that is we're getting old, Danny, because I mean that was. I almost forgot about Dave Zabriskie. You don't hear anything about Dave Zabriskie anymore, and he was like he was a
Well,
pretty popular dude back then. It's like,
well, he was fast as hell. He won the
mm-hmm.
yellow jersey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think he infamously crashed out of the yellow jersey as well.
yeah, yeah.
But he was maybe the top world tour. Then it was called the Pro Tour, I think. But he was the top world tour time trials for stage
It's
races. And
the last of the ragtag American teams. I think that was kind of the tail end of like a primarily American squad over there.
yes,
I mean it
yes,
was
yes, yes.
they just
Majority American.
Yeah,
Yep,
I think Robert Miller was like he was like not Robert Miller, David Miller was like a standout foreigner on the team, right? I mean, there was like one or
yep,
two guys that were foreigners, but everybody else was
yep.
kind of home. The big get was Christian Vandeveld, right? To pull him off of because he was with CSC or somebody like that,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And to like
Yep.
score him to come over to this small American team. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And
Yeah,
Jonathan
because
Vaughters would be working the sidelines at the Downers Grove Criterium, you know, in like a
yes.
all snazzy and Euro dressed. I remember I'd
Yes.
poke fun at him. I'd be like, "You're the best dressed man in cycling." He didn't know
Well,
what.
he was quite the dandy. He would have the
Yes.
matching like pink socks
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pink bow tie,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. A
he'd be
scarf.
walking around like Oscar Wilde, kind
Yeah.
of like
Very,
hello,
yeah.
and people are like, well, "Who is this dude?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I run the U.S. Cycling team at
Like
the Tour de France."
you're Downers Grove, bro.
Yeah, people wear cargo shorts and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Seinfeld sneakers.
Yeah.
No, but those were funny times. No, they had a slew of like great riders, and I think obviously Christian was as high as fourth at the tour and
Mm-hmm.
GC. So like they had the heavy hitters, and they had that whole fallout with like uh, kind of a fallout. They had Wiggins, as well, but
Yeah.
that's when people were like, this guy could win a GT. So
Mm-hmm.
Sky came in and just bought him out. I remember they paid a gajillion dollars to buy him out of his contract from Waters. That was like
Mm-hmm.
a whole thing Waters has written about. But yeah, well, fast forward. So Zabriskie, as you may know, Joe, is you can find him on Instagram, and he posts all kinds of interesting photos. And he still kind of rides a bike. It's totally kind of just for fun, and
Mm-hmm.
he seems to be having a blast. And so good for him. I mean, all those guys went through so much craziness, but
And he's not involved in media or anything like that currently, right?
no,
He's not doing
not
anything.
that I
Hmm.
know of. I know he had that company DZ's Nuts,
That's right. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
chamois
Mm-hmm.
cream, and it must be noted just for the record that while he was racing anyway, Zabriskie maybe best known as having maybe the worst flatulence in the
Oh
peloton.
no.
And so his team bus and his teammates and the people who had a room with him during Grand Tours, it was a recurring comment and theme, and it was something that he would have a lot of fun with. Let's just put it that way.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah,
so,
that's right. These
uh,
nuts, all that stuff. Wow, what a flashback. Yeah, I mean, I've sold
yeah.
these nuts in the shop, and I've
Yes.
sold I've sold the chamois cream. It was yeah, uh, interesting times.
Those were funny times, and now I think he hangs around with I'm drawing a blank on his name. The other temporary Tour de France winner who was he a Mennonite? Who am I thinking of?
Floyd Landis.
Floyd Landis.
Hmm.
He's still super big buddies with Floyd, I believe,
Okay.
and you'll see them make appearances on Instagram and maybe Sea Otter and things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's cool. I'm glad those guys got back on track. I remember interviewing Floyd a couple times.
Yeah, Floyd has a kind
Like
of a
way after
he's got a thriving company as well. You know, they do like CBD type stuff.
CBD. Yep.
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 I mean, they're distributed by QBP.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else does them, but some of the guys at the shop buy his products from. They get them from the catalog there
It's kind of
regularly.
funny that it kind of reminds me of like they're more like the ragtag kind of dudes,
Mm-hmm.
almost like you have the one trajectory with like Frankie Andre going in like the commentary, like domestic
Mm-hmm.
scene, like still traveling, calling these races, and that's great. He's got his thing, and then you got like Christian. He's like into like app development and deals and like
Mm-hmm.
NBC commentary during the tour, and like he's doing all these kind of glitzy things. And then you get like Floyd and like Zabriskie, and they're just like riding these crazy like bikes and like crazy places and just doing all this fun stuff. And we're probably forgetting a number of other guys, but it's kind of interesting. Like I think someone needs to do like a doc like 10, 20 years later, like what's up with these guys. I
Mm-hmm.
think that would actually be pretty compelling viewing, but kind of interesting where they all ended up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know, I remember I used to track all the 7-Eleven guys for a long time. You know, for a while I did. Um, and like Andy Hampston has a bike company, and he was doing tours in Italy and
Yep.
had a lot of
Yeah.
stuff going on there. I think still is. You know, I haven't
Yeah,
looked closely at him.
Hampton Cycles.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
believe I believe they're thriving. I
Mm-hmm.
saw them at Nabs
Mm-hmm.
in I think Pennsylvania like a number of years ago. Obviously, we know Bob Roll is still doing the
Yeah.
call on
Mm-hmm.
NBC. Yeah, it's definitely interesting where a lot of these cats ended up and kind of what they're doing. Yeah. Oh, Tom. Well, who's the other guy? Is it Tom Peterson? No, who am I thinking of?
Tom
He
Sch-
was the
Tom Schuler,
no
who ran
younger. He
Saturn
was
and
more. No, I know him. I was thinking
uh-huh.
of someone. The guy who I'm just drawing a total blank. He was supposed to be the next Lance Armstrong. He raced with Christian and a lot of these guys. I know he got busted twice
Oh boy.
for the naughty stuff. Just
Amer-
trying to. He was the climber guy, Colorado guy.
American guy.
Just, yeah, I'm just totally drawing a blank.
Hmm.
It's on the tip of my tongue. I'll think of it in a minute, but
Sure.
yeah, like I said, just kind of interesting where these guys ended up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess it gives you got to give the guys credit who have been able to live from the sport, who have been able to
yes,
kind of keep around it, and like I've always kind of admired that the ones that have been able to stick around and make a living out of it, and were smart enough to kind of pivot and be able to stay in it if they wanted to. There's some guys that just turned their back on it and just did not want to have. They were done when they were done racing, and I get that. I
yeah,
get that part of it too. Like when you're there are two ways to go with bike racing, and one is like just to turn around and never look at it again, go into
yeah,
construction or something, and then
right,
then there's the group of people they don't know how to do anything else, and they gotta like use what they've invested their whole life in cycling, and that's pretty much what they got, so they're able to make it make something of it.
Yeah,
They're able
it's
to do something with their knowledge and their all their experience. So
yeah, no, it's very interesting. By the way, the name I was thinking of was Tom Danielson.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
great climber. I don't know if he won stages in the tour, but he was definitely like top 10, I think, and he won, I think, some Giro Vuelta stages, but
Mm-hmm.
including like Tour de Georgia and maybe placed well in California and stuff like that. But yeah, to be honest, I'm a little bit of two minds with some of the riders who went on because I know there's a lot of resentment towards some of them because they made a lot of money and they weren't always truthful, and then they kind of came back and they're back in the sport and they're still making money. So I know that there are some folks who are quite resentful of them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I do feel like some of them made like a very truthful, honest kind of like acknowledgement and an apology, and they guys like Floyd and even Zabriskie and they're kind of doing their thing. So yeah, it's definitely complicated. And even folks beyond Lance, like it's a very complicated picture. But nonetheless, like I said, it is kind of interesting to see like some of these guys like on Instagram and stuff, and they're just like regular dudes now. Like they have a wife and a kid, and they're just like riding like clunker bikes, and they're just showing up at Sea Otter and like
Mm-hmm.
eating snow cones and taking CBD and
Yeah.
riding around in like jorts and like it's just like, hey, that guy was in the Tour de France. He
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
ride 40 miles an hour and win stage. I don't know. It's pretty trippy. It's pretty trippy.
Yeah, I mean they pretty much go back to being essentially unrecognizable. It's not so much like a. I mean, they just become anonymous again. I guess in the United States, not that they even as professionals, I guess they weren't very well known. I mean,
Right, because
they,
it's the U.S.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
Dave Zabriskie could pretty much walk around in Chicago and nobody would know he's a professional bike racer, even in his
Right.
heyday. So.
Yeah, except for nerds like us.
Mm-hmm.
But well, what's interesting too is like they're obviously American, so they're still in North America. Most of these cats, it's like we know that story that we always heard reading and learning about cycling as we were coming up, like the classic story, like, well, Bernard Hinault didn't become a professional; he would be working in the factory with his father,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
packing boxes or mending rubber tires,
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And then like here though, it's like these guys are in the U.S. and they got families, they have connections. It's like if they were in Europe, they would probably become like sports directors, or they would become like, whatever for like teams, or do something, work with sponsors and be a liaison between like sponsors and like teams or whatever, like
A lot.
all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
kinds of things. But here it's like they don't really have that opportunity because U.S. racing, especially now, is like definitely on the low end of
Mm-hmm.
its trajectory. Hopefully it comes back, but even still, like it maybe would even have those opportunities. I know Frankie is like he's been a DS for like top US teams, but now he's like working as a race announcer and he's done this and that. He worked with me and James Start at bicycling on projects, including tour coverage and stuff like that. So, he's kind of a journeyman, I guess. But yeah, it is actually pretty interesting how some of these cats ended up. And
Yeah, you're right about
it's
the Europeans. A lot. I think that is the path for a lot of them over there as far as staying in the sport. They do become DSs. They're working with teams. They own bike shops. A lot of them own bike shops. A lot
yes,
of old pros in
yes.
Europe own bicycle shops. That's a big thing for them to do, to like go back to their hometown and open a bicycle shop. And
And it makes perfect
mhm.
sense, right? It's like it's kind of a no-brainer because it's like everybody knows the name,
Yeah, yeah.
especially if they had some decent results.
Hmm.
Hello, and then it's like, of course, I'm going to go to that bike shop. Like, chances are it's going to at least do fairly well, if not really well.
Hmm.
And just your point about seeing these old pros, like, I was very lucky. I got to go to the tour a number of times, and had that media credential, so you're in that bubble, whatever. And it's like I just remember walking around and like seeing like former pros, and I'd be like, wait a second, is that like Guido Bontempi?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
is that like Charlie Wagelius? And like you would just see these guys like Tor Hushovd. He now works for like uh, Danish TV or Norwegian TV. It just uh, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. It's like, I would just be like, oh my God, I like remember reading about that guy in like Winning Magazine,
Well,
and
the first
so
X,
trippy.
the first old X Pro that I ever saw in Europe was Francesco Moser. Because he
Wow.
had retired like in, I don't know, 87, 88. He retired.
Yeah.
Like right as I was getting into the sport, he was retiring. It was maybe his last year was maybe 87 or 88,
Oh my
88.
God.
And I saw him at the World Championships in maybe 92 or 94. It was in Spain.
Mm,
And,
mm,
I saw him riding around on a bike. And by that time, he had like white hair, like just
yeah.
all of his hair was just white. But it was
Yeah.
Francesco Moser. I mean, he really stuck out. And he was so fit. He was so dark and tan,
Mm-hmm.
Italian
Mm-hmm.
kind of olive skin. And his
Yep.
hair was white, but he was ripped. I mean, like he looked like he
Oh.
just came off he just, like he could race that day. And I was always so impressed. It made such an impression. I'm like, man, when I'm that dude's age, I want to look like Francesco Moser on a bike,
Yes. Yes.
And I
And he
mean,
was super good looking and a great dresser. I mean, a
oh
lot of
yeah,
that
yeah.
goes some way too, but he had obviously great style
Oh,
and one of the great
he
cyclists,
was
obviously.
the tail end of that generation. He was the tail end of those guys that still wore suits. The
Yep.
bicycle racers
Yep.
that wore suits. That kind of Eddie Merckx. He probably started at the when Eddie Merckx was a little older, but he was still that generation where
Yep.
they weren't wearing warm up suits, or they were wearing track suits. They were, but like going to the races, they were still in suits and smoking
Yeah.
cigarettes. you know.
And they'd have on cologne and
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
turtlenecks with the sport
Uh huh.
jacket and
Yeah,
the shiny shoes
yeah,
and
yeah.
real like playboys kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah. They look like jet setters. They look like swingers, and it was
Totally.
he was that tail end of that era of racing, and it was just a legend, man. Like I said, to this day I still remember him. I was thinking about him yesterday. I took a solstice day ride last
I
night.
saw
Yeah,
I
right.
saw something on your Insta stories there. I was like, "Where's Joe?"
Yeah, I went down. Well, that's on the path. That's part of the path where that I told
Uh
you
huh.
we've got a ride, and I took advantage of every last bit of daylight yesterday, and went out for a late ride, and I was thinking about that. I was thinking about being old and
Good
age
for you,
and all
man.
that stuff,
Good.
and Francesco Moser
Sure.
went through my brain yesterday. So. Uh,
Well, yeah. I mean, thank God he's still with us.
hmm
I probably one of the best looking guys on a bike ever.
Yeah,
He just seemed like he was one with the bike, and he had kind of like the perfect quintessential cycling body. These massive legs, but
yeah.
very very like barrel chested. It looks like, and just really taut, kind of sinuous muscles, and just looks so great on a bike. Had that Italian champ jersey. Like, come on, like you don't really get much more romantic than that.
No, no, he
Um,
was always he was one of those images I have in my head. It's what I was what
unbelievable.
I always imagined my that I looked like on a bike.
Right.
And then I'd catch a pic I'd catch myself like riding by the front of a store or something, and
Yes.
the reflection, and I'm like, that looks nothing like Francesco Moser.
You're like, shit, I look like Peter Griffin.
Yeah, yeah, oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. So
no, I know what you mean. It's like those memes, like, here's what I think I look like, and here's what people see me. Here's what I really look like. Those memes.
hmm
I've
yeah,
totally been there and still am. But no, I think it's funny. I think everyone coming up always has someone, and it may not even be totally conscious, but I think everyone has someone they kind of like want to emulate and maybe even kind of want to look like to some extent. Like I think we all have that rider that we kind of want to look like. I think mine was like Sean Kelly or like
hmm
Greg LeMond.
sure.
But even like rando dudes, like remember like Gerd Chinese, the
Yeah, yeah,
climber, like
yeah.
with the long hair. Like I just remember these like rando dudes, and for some reason I like picked up on them, and I'm just like, Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. I think it's probably just normal when you're growing up to emulate someone like that.
Pedro,
People do it with NBA stars and baseball stars, obviously.
yeah,
So
yeah, baseball. Like if you grow up playing baseball here in the States, you always have that. You try to copy the swing of the home run swing of some baseball player. I remember
yes,
growing up. It's like you want it to be Dave Kingman or somebody like that in Chicago.
Dave Kingman. Oh
Yeah,
wow, there's a good throwback.
yeah, yeah.
Um, that's amazing.
And speaking of Gert Jan Tunis,
Yeah.
I was uh, riding with Pedro Delgado, who was teammates
Whoa.
with Gert Jan Tunisa and roommates with him at one point.
Oh.
And he used to he told a couple of stories about him. Apparently he liked to walk around naked all the time. He was like I'd hear him make comments. It's not that he was telling Joe, me a story specifically, but I'd listen in as he was talking to somebody else about this crazy guy who cook in his bedroom and had like a hot plate and makes up he'd make food in his room and
I
like to
thought for
walk.
a second you meant cook, meaning something else, but
Oh
never
no.
mind. We won't go there.
Yeah, no.
Um,
Yeah, I guess he liked he had some sort of diet that he'd something that he'd like to cook up in the bedroom and he apparently he was naked a lot at the
just
hotel.
like
Yeah.
ate like lizard tripe or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I remember that guy. And I just Google image a couple of photos. I'm trying to think of who he reminds me of, but he's got like a very he's got like strong facial
Mm-hmm.
features. Um,
Yeah,
kind of
it looks
not
very
not Ivan Drago, but like something very like kind of hardcore.
Neanderthal, doesn't he? He has that kind
Yeah,
of a weird
he does kind
Neanderthal
of
look. Hmm.
he does kind of look Neanderthal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is so funny, but Joe, I must say, if I may segue, do you realize that the Tour de France starts a week from Saturday?
It's really coming up on us. I mean, it's like it's fast approaching, fast approaching. And
Um,
I guess looking at the calendar, I do, but it's kind of hard to believe we're at this point in the calendar already.
and actually, I correct myself. It's a week from Friday, so it starts on Friday in
Mm-hmm,
Copenhagen.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know, man. It's like I just looked up and it's like, oh, the tour is like about a week away, and I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah, yeah. You getting
where did this
ready?
come from?
You psyched?
Well,
You're psyched
kind
for
of.
early mornings and all of that. I mean, you like to watch the stages, and I mean for Chicago time, that means
Yes,
being up at 6:30 or 7, right? I mean, it depends on how much
100.
coverage you want to intake, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I obviously I watched a lot of the Giro live, but
Mm-hmm.
I normally caught at least the last hour, but often the last 2 hours. Probably realistic, I caught the last hour and a half on average during the
Mm-hmm.
week, and then weekends I'd watch like 2.5 hours for the mountain stages and such. But yeah, no, I'm ready. Like I'm still like super pumped to watch all the stages. So I'll watch even the quote unquote boring stages. Sometimes those can be the most telling and decisive because of like crosswinds or crashes or what have you. But no, I'm very psyched, and I plan to be up. Fortunately, I have a late start at work, so I can get up, and I'm afforded this time to kind of like make my coffee, go for a walk around the block, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even squeeze in a little ride. But then, yeah, sit down at the computer and fire it up, and yeah, just kind of watch the last hour or two, possibly even a little bit more. Especially those early stages, like they're so fun. I still get that buzz. I don't know about you, but
Mm-hmm.
I know you got the shop going on. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked, and I think looks like a lot of the heavy hitters are going to be present. So from that point of view, we're going to have Roglic and Pogacar and a bunch of other cats. Jumbo Visma looks like it's going to be like this powerhouse team again, and such and such. Ineos, of course, and a bunch of other teams. I don't know. I think it's going to be fun,
I think
and
yeah,
I'm pretty stoked, man.
I think the crowds are going to be huge. Like
I do too.
I'm like curious to see what the roads are going to look like, just because I know a lot of people that are heading over to Europe. I mean, not necessarily for the tour, but just
Hmm.
people that are traveling there and people that are just kind of making their way there after having not been able to travel for a couple of years. And
Yep.
I imagine that the roads are going to be packed. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen there with roads and people management and just
Yep.
the circus this year, because I think that the last couple of years, obviously, things have been kind of tamer than they have been in the past, obviously. But although
Yeah.
last year the crowds were uh, certainly bigger than they had been in a while, but I think this year is going to be a massive.
Yeah, I agree. I'm expecting like an even more amped up
Mm-hmm.
with, pandemic is still happening, but it seems to be winding down, knock on wood.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. I think it's, last year was kind of like the first real big comeback year. Obviously, the tour kept going during the pandemic, but there were so many lockdowns and restrictions. I did feel like last year was kind of the first real one since the pandemic had started. And
Was
this one will just be more amped up. Plus, you got stages like Alpe d'Huez this year. I
mm-hmm.
mean, it's gonna be wild. And yeah, man, I just got the buzz. I feel like I've done a nice thing this year where I followed pro cycling, but not like I haven't burned myself out yet. Like I'm fresh
Uh-huh.
and I'm ready. I'm ready for the tour. I'm ready for the 3 week slog. And that first week is electric. It's just great to watch the races and the finishes and see who's in, see who's out, and all that. We got Chris Froome back this year. Like I don't expect him to race super great, but like just it adds to the buzz. And we'll see if the Americans can grab a stage or two. Sepp Kuss is there and stuff like that. Well, it could be a great tour. We'll see.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting to have excitement around Chris Froome, which is kind of
Yes,
it's like who's
yes.
ever been excited about Chris Froome?
Right, right.
At the
Even
Tour
when
de France.
even when he was on top, it was like,
Yeah,
all right, Chris Froome.
it's Chris Froome, I guess. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
That's one
like
guy I've never cycled. Patterned my cycling visions after.
yeah, I don't think anyone grew up emulating him
No.
necessarily.
Uh-uh.
Definitely not the world's most exciting or charismatic rider. Obviously, super talented, and
Yeah,
he
and
can he knows how to win races, but not someone who has a flair. He's pretty gangly on the bike, and
yeah.
he's infamous for staring at his stem, his power meter.
And
He's had a couple cool rides here and there, and he's obviously won a ton of crazy, awesome races. But totally point well taken. But now with his injury and his kind of slow comeback, like it will be interesting. Honestly, I would like to see him do pretty well. Like maybe I think it's a long shot, but who knows? Maybe he'll come with like some killer form and pull out a stage win. I think that would be his like great best possible scenario. Like I don't see him racing into the GC at all, but
people,
well, we'll see what
people
happens.
love a comeback story, Danny. They love to
Oh, they
build them
do.
up and knock them down and watch them come back again. I mean,
Yes, yes.
that's the way that's the way the stories are written. So,
And we
it's
got the yes, and we got the little Roubaix, the fake Roubaix stage. That could be
hmm
fun. It's in Copenhagen. I think all those stages are pretty flat, actually. Surprise, surprise, around there. But I think whatever. I think it's going to be fun. I can't wait to they get to some of the mountain stages, obviously. But the first week is wild. I don't know if Cav is even racing. I haven't kept on that alert, but he was obviously trying to go to break the record for Merckx, but he's tied. So if that doesn't happen this year, will it ever happen? I have no idea. So we'll see, man. There's a lot of storylines.
yeah. Are they doing Mont Ventoux this year at the tour?
I don't. I do not think they're doing Ventoux this year. I know they're doing Alpe d'Huez, and I haven't looked at the whole course in detail, but I don't think Ventoux is part of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
But
I happened to cross some sort of. I was watching something on Movistar. Movistar's got a they've got a pretty intense YouTube channel. They do a lot of they produce a lot of
yeah.
content. Yeah, it's very good. I wish you spoke Spanish because I think you'd really enjoy it.
Oh,
Although I think you might be able to get some closed captioning in English, but it's
oh,
not.
nice, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. At the very least, you can watch it, and you'd probably get a little bit out of it. But it's They do a very good.
Yeah.
Their social media team does a good job of it, of kind of chronicling stuff. They just some of it is just kind of typical stuff with the cook and making stuff. But
Yeah.
when they're following the races, it's pretty interesting. It's fun to watch. And speaking Spanish, I get so much out of it because the information's really good, and just kind of watching what they're doing. And they were following them to. They followed the team to a small race. It was like the Mont Ventoux Challenge. It was like some
Yep.
little Ventoux race,
Yep.
and
Yep.
the insights were great because they were following, the team director,
Yep. Yep.
and um, and he was pointing out this is a small race. This isn't a major race, and
Mm-hmm.
and they follow him in to register the racers, and he's got photos of their licenses on his phone, and he goes up to like a just register what you would think, kind of what you encounter like in a school gym, when you're
Yes.
when you're
Yes.
registering for a local crit. It had
Yeah.
it had that feel to it, where you're just walking up to the table and
Nice.
just kind of showing the lady the
Yeah.
licenses, and they're taking down
Yep.
names, and then they give him a bag, like a plastic bag with stickers and nameplates, and he's like, well, if
Yeah.
he's like, this obviously is not the Tour de France. At the Tour we got a little bit more of an operation, but here,
Right.
here's the sticker for the car, here's the sticker for the second car, and here are the here are the numbers for the bikes, and
I love
I
it.
just the small time, you forget about all of these little races, all of these
Yep.
the ones that you never hear about, these tune-up races, because it's they're doing Ventoux obviously to tune up for to give the racers a kind of a preview of maybe what that race is, what a tour stage is going to look like, right?
Yep.
Early in the
Yep.
season, they're essentially like recon races, so that they can make some notes or kind of test themselves before the July race. And it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just kind of it was interesting. It was a reminder of how even though our sport has gotten a lot, the sport has gotten a lot bigger. It's still very small in the grand scheme of things. All these races that you don't see, all these tune-up and preparation races that are not the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia, or the Giro di Lombardia,
Yep. Yep.
the stuff that makes up the bulk of the calendar. It's really small. It's still kind of quaint because they're just sitting out
Yep.
at a cafe, you know, going through the list and making notes, and people are walking by with their groceries and stuff. So it's
Yeah. Right. Right.
just kind of like looking at, what are these guys doing? What are all these stickers and all these numbers? So.
Yeah.
And as they follow them through the race, I mean, the cars are, they're still parked on a side street and in front of a grocery store or something. The guys are
Yeah.
still warming up out there, and it's not just any guys, because I think Valverde was in that race. So they brought some heavy hitters to that race. It wasn't like they had just the lower end of the roster there. So they had some good racers there, but it was interesting to watch.
Yeah. No, I had a lot of flashbacks when you were talking about that. Going to like the folding table, and there's just like
Hmm.
some local volunteer taking your license and jotting a couple things down in the old spiral notebook.
Yeah, yeah. It had
No,
that
it's
feel
it's
to it.
fun.
Yeah.
That's fun. Well, well, one, I wish I spoke Spanish as well. It's a
Hmm.
lifelong regret. I took 4 years in high school and I couldn't tell you a word, but yeah, go American education. But well, I was gonna say, whoever does, I've watched the first season of that Movistar Netflix series, and I know there's a second season available. I haven't watched it yet.
Hmm.
So I was just gonna say, you mentioned their kind of talent for the social media aspect, and I'm not surprised. Like whoever got that deal with Netflix, like genius. I mean, that just brought in crazy impressions, crazy advertising and marketing for them,
Hmm.
just to be on Netflix. Just the default being on that platform is so, it's the biggest in the world. And it's a great series. I love it. I just love the behind the scenes. Obviously, I'm biased, so I eat it up. But I've always loved. I've never been the world's biggest Valverde fan,
Hmm.
but I've definitely always liked some of the Movistar riders. The Once team. I always like those guys. I know Movistar is like the next iteration from Once and Benesto, right?
No, no,
Um,
they're different, very different.
Oh wait,
So
I thought they were the following version. But
no,
wasn't Onse? Who am I confusing here?
so that originally they're Reynolds. So it went from
Oh.
Reynolds to Benesto to like Islas Baleares to
Oh, okay,
to
okay.
Costa Sparn to I guess
Yes.
to Movistar after that, after Costa Sparn. But yeah, it's a different that's a different group. That was Manolo
Got
Saiz was Once. And then
yes. Yes, yes,
they
yes.
blew up with the whole Festina with the like that whole thing
Yes.
when
Yeah.
like a lot of those guys went that direction. So
Yep.
but yeah, no, they're I believe they're I don't know if they're the oldest or the Kunik is the oldest like enterprise, like longest running team,
Right.
in the peloton. But they're if they're not the oldest or one of the top two or three oldest organizations,
Okay.
that have been around because they've consistently feel every year they may have changed, the leadership may have changed sponsors, but the same people that are running that team, like they go all the way back to Indurain and pre-Indurain, like
Okay. Yeah.
the origins of Pedro Delgado and all of that. Like
Right.
back into I think maybe even the mid late 70s. So that is essentially the same group of people are running Movistar today.
Okay,
Hmm.
that's the dynasty I was thinking of.
Hmm.
But I've always been a big fan of Mikel Landa.
Yeah.
I don't know why, I just always enjoyed watching him race.
Hmm.
I love to see him do well. I think he was third at the Giro, but yeah, I just love the backstory, and then it's like a truly Spanish organization. It's a nice break from the U.S. teams and the French teams and some of that. So just like obviously they have their own panache and kind of style of racing and all of that.
Hmm.
So I enjoyed that. But yeah, whoever's running the movie star stuff, like kudos to them. Like it's just such a ginormous brand, and they seem to be really killing it. So I'll have to check out that channel though and see if I can get something from it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fun to watch. There's a lot of stuff there, and if you speak Spanish, then it's extra fun because you can follow along a little closer. But if you're just a fan of
Nice.
cycling, then there's plenty of there to digest, just to watch it.
Yeah.
So.
So for the tour, real quick, so I confirmed the Vontu is not in this year's race.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about how it starts in Denmark, got a few stages there. Stage four, it heads over to France. The major climbs I'm looking at are La Planche de Belleville. Been to that climb, covering the tour. I love that climb. So that's on stage seven. I think that's the first real mountain test. And then they have a handful of other ones, including Hodecam, which is a great climb, stage finish. We talked about Alpe d'Huez. Yeah, I mean, we got some really good mountain stages. I think it's a nice course. I haven't looked at it in great detail. We've got let's see how many time trials do we have, one or two. Obviously, it's going to finish on the Champs. We have an opening individual. Excuse me, Joe. We have an
Oh,
opening time trial, which I haven't seen in a little bit. An ITT, so that'll be good. It's 13.2, so it's not quite a prologue. It's an actual stage. It's a little bit longer than the old school prologues, I guess. But there's that, and then the penultimate stage is a 40K time trial. That could be very interesting. So it's
hmm.
just long enough. And let me look at the profile. I don't know if it's got any climbs or rolling stuff. Oh, it's pretty much flat. It's actually got a couple little downhill up and downs at the end, but that could be interesting if it's tight. We shall see. Maybe it'll just be close on GC, and the usual fast guys will go for the stage win. But
How many
it's
days
gonna
and how many days are they doing in Denmark? They doing the first 2 days, 3 days?
The first 3 days,
Three
yeah,
days. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. They want, obviously want to milk it since they're
Sure.
making the big trip over and bringing all the trucks and what have you. So, yeah, and Denmark has that big, famous, crazy long bridge,
Mm-hmm.
which I see in all the ads and stuff for the tour. So they'll milk that. Good for them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
they
so
pay a lot of money to bring the race over
oh,
there. So
big
yeah.
big time, yeah, and they get a lot of money pumped into the economy too. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
kind of cool. Good for the Danes. So yeah, individual time trial will start. Two flat stages. I think one could possibly favor a breakaway. I think it's just lumpy enough, and I think the third stage is going to be almost definitely a field sprint. So, but it's the tour. We'll see how things go. I'm pretty stoked, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it. I mean, I guess I'm excited too. I'm just, I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to some July racing. I think that's always,
Yeah.
it's just, it helps pass the month. Although, once it's over, then you're just like at least
Oh,
in Chicago, you're like, whoa, okay, now it's such a letdown.
it
It's
is.
such
It's a huge hangover,
oh
and like
yeah,
you're just
yeah,
sad, and you're like
yeah,
moping around. You're like, "Where's
yeah.
the tour?" And everyone's like complaining.
Yeah, it's Chicago specific. I mean, it's just a thing here in the Midwest. It's like August is like, oh man, it just
Uh,
brings the school kid in me is still there's still a little bit of that left. Like, oh man, last month of summer, the last month of
yep.
before we go back to school, it's like
Yes.
it's kind of that dread.
And
But
yeah, and it always feels like such a like biblical long time until the Vuelta starts
hmm
after the tour. It just feels like forever. I know we got Classica San Sebastian the week after the tour is always fun.
hmm
Lombardia comes obviously later, but I love the Vuelta. I know you love the Vuelta. I always look forward to that. It's got its own kind of whole atmosphere and
yeah.
vibe. So
They're
it's
starting
good
in the
time,
yeah,
good
they're
times.
starting in the Netherlands this year in Utrecht.
Oh, you know what? That wasn't even on my radar. Thanks for letting
hmm
me know about that.
Yeah, yeah. So
It's always funny when the tour goes to like some country that's not like bordering.
hmm
It's like, what are you doing in the Netherlands?
yeah, it took me a while to understand what was happening with all of that. I remember when they talked about bringing the start of the tour to like Washington D.C.
The
or
DC,
right?
the
Was it the
Giro.
Giro to Washington? Yeah, I
Yeah,
know they were talking about a grand tour in Washington D.C. for a little while. That would have been crazy.
yes,
That would have been crazy.
yes.
Yeah, I
Oh my,
don't.
yeah, people were just logistically like they'd have to have like a whole day or two in between. They were like, "Oh
Yeah,
my God," and
yeah,
please don't have a time trial. We don't want to bring the TT bikes. Like, I
yeah.
just remember like some of the staff being like, "Oh, please, I hope this doesn't happen." Um, but yeah, I actually just Utrecht. I don't know if you've been there, Joe, but Utrecht, I was lucky to get there a couple times.
Uh huh.
Super super nice town, very fun, cute town. So I'm excited to see the Vuelta start in Utrecht, but we'll talk to all about that.
Yeah, we'll do tour.
Yeah,
We'll do tour first, and then we'll start digging into Vuelta. There's some crazy stuff going on there with I think even as of like recently, they're still trying to get up. They're trying to they're trying to get the highest climb ever in the Vuelta. To some place and where there's a telescope. They're trying to.
oh,
I just saw
nice.
something on the news about them trying to get permission to
Oh,
finish
okay.
a stage at some telescope somewhere. So I'll get more information on that. Um,
Yeah,
but
man, that's
they're always trying to outdo every. They have to fight a
yep,
little harder. To kind of set them. They're there at the end of the calendar, and they're always trying to make room between the Giro and the Tour. For themselves, and they've got to do
yep,
something to kind of stand out a little bit. And I think
yes,
they've kind of found their place there at the end of the calendar because people are really they go there to try to salvage their seasons. Maybe
yep,
have a make up for a failed tour or someone who crashes out of the tour, shows up and tries to put on a show at the Vuelta. The racing's always the racing's always good, and the Spanish, all the Spanish guys, of course, all the rivalries, with the Spanish teams are fun to watch.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
But there's always, and then there's always the foreigner, the guy from outside who's he's got to do something to secure his contract for next season, or make up for what he didn't do earlier in the season. So it's always fun. It's always a kind of an intriguing race.
Yeah, the last chance saloon.
It is very much so.
And and of course too, there are guys prepping for the World Championships.
Yeah,
so they're using that. They might do 1 week or a week and a half, like some of the sprinters, and there's always that. I just know, like, and some guys don't thrive in the heat, so there's kind of that almost too, and definitely one of the gnarliest climbing races around. The Angliru, is that the Vuelta kind, the Angliru, the one that Horner kind of solidified his win against Nibali on. So there's like some epic climbs, and I know Froome made himself known to the world, I think on the Angliru or one of those climbs, when he beat Wiggins, and the whole team was freaking out. They're like, "You can't beat Wiggins." People talk about that one tour stage, but it was actually the year before that in the Vuelta when they took Froome, and he was a totally unknown rider, and he smashed it, and I think he got on the podium, and people were like, he's actually better than our leader, Wiggins.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal, but love the Vuelta.
Thanks for listening to the Bike Shop Society podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at mail@bikeshopsociety.com. If you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you can look us up at Bike Shop Society. That's it. Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Now, back to the show. Goodbye.
Joe, I noticed, I have to say, tonight you were kind of late at the shop. What's the update on the shop, man? You putting in the big hours or what?
Yeah, we're just, we're just in the thick of it right now. A lot of repairs and no help. I'm essentially the mechanic at the bike shop too right now. Yeah, I have a little bit of help here and there. I've got a little bit of part-time help. I think you've met Ed before, so he's helping me out. But the bulk of it is falling on me right now. I'm mechanic / salesperson / bike shop owner, and small bike shop owner, and it's cool. It's cool. I mean, I kind of knew it going into the season. I mean, I've been trying to score a mechanic all year, and I saw the writing on the wall for the season. They're just not out. There's nobody out there. It's not a surprise, really, that there aren't, there aren't real qualified bike mechanics. I mean, I'm teaching some people, and I've got a couple of young kids who are very helpful. That would, there's a young girl that I have working at the bike shop, Isa, who's been there for about a year now, a little bit over a year now, who would actually be I mean, I know for a fact that because I have people that have worked at other bike shops that work for me. She would probably be a mechanic at some other bike shops at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, she could probably be like, she would be a mechanic, considered a mechanic. I mean, she's able to build bikes out of a box, and some of the derailleurs are always the hardest thing. I think they're probably the most difficult thing to master for anybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even for moi. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, derailleurs are just, they're tricky. Like when people ask me, teach me how to adjust a derailleur, I'm like,
how much time you got?
I'm like, that's a lot. That's a really tough one, and
it's like, teach me how to fly a plane real quick.
Yeah. And that's really hard. And I would say that's probably the trickiest, probably the trickiest of things, but the rest of the stuff, I mean, like, as I've had her doing some things for me and kind of prepping bikes for tune-ups and things like that. And she'll hand over a bike, and I really don't have to do a whole bunch, except for maybe truing the wheels and adjusting the derailleurs, once she's kind of done with it, which is like, wow. Yeah. I'm super impressed. I'm super impressed with her. So
I've had the fortune to meet her a couple of times. We had a nice meal. I know we had a nice meal together that one time, and She seems very lovely. She seems like a great listener and a great student, and she struck me as very like kind of logical and like methodical.
Yeah, she's very
So
cerebral. Yeah.
she has that kind of brain where it's
Hmm.
like she wants to understand the logic and she wants to know how it's going to end before she starts it almost.
She's a,
So
as I was telling her, I know people can fix bikes. There's a real difference between people who fix bikes and mechanics, like real true professional
mm,
mechanic, and
right.
I almost have trouble calling myself a mechanic. I mean, I've learned mechanics and I think I'm pretty good, and
Hmm.
I would be a mechanic at probably any bike shop, but I still don't consider myself a mechanic. It's not my passion.
Yeah,
It's not
I
the
think I
thing.
know what you mean.
It's
Yeah,
not what I live for. I'm good at it. I've become very good at it,
yeah,
and I'm very competent at it. But working with mechanics, like I'm like, boy, you
yeah.
you're not a good salesman, but you're a hell of a mechanic.
Right,
You
right,
know what I
right.
mean? Like,
Yeah, they can improvise. They can make do with what's needed. They can
yeah,
MacGyver stuff, and
yeah.
they can do it pretty fast and competently,
Hmm.
and it's gonna stay. But I know you're a good mechanic too, though.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I can be a mechanic. I drift. I guess I am a mechanic, but
Yeah, for sure.
it's not how I started. And having worked with like, they're just people that have kind of a passion for it and are really, really, incredibly. I mean, I don't know. It's just a
Yeah,
different.
it's almost.
It's a different thing. It's a different
I know
thing.
what you mean.
Hmm.
It's almost like a calling. It's like
Hmm.
they get like their curiosity levels like on another level,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they want to know how to fix everything and take it apart and put it
Hmm.
back together. And but it's kind of ideal in a way. You have all the business know-how and
Yeah, they love it.
you know how to
They
handle all the
love it.
bikes.
Yeah,
So
they love it, and I do it because I have to do it. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
for them, it's that. I guess it's the love part. It's the love of doing it. I do it, and I'm good at it, and
yeah.
I've become really good at it because I just a repetition, but
Sure.
those guys just, they just love to tinker. That's what they do, even in their off time. And during my off time, I'm doing this, Danny.
You're becoming a world famous cycling
I
podcaster.
want to talk. I want to talk about how cool I am, Danny. I don't. That's what I prefer to do. Uh, you know.
And then listen to it again later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Hey man, let's just we're in that it's the age we live in. No, but that's cool, man. So it sounds like things are going pretty swimmingly,
Yeah,
and
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I think that
yeah,
no matter how much you prepare and how ready you are, and
yeah.
for me this year, I equate it to being like, if we were just talking about the tour, if this was a tour, right?
Hmm.
It's I look at this season. This season's like a climbing stage, and
Mm,
an incredible, like two cat ones and a cat two climb, right? And
gotcha.
I'm a sprinter, you know,
Okay.
just
Okay. I
just
like
trying
where
to
this is going.
hang in there and get under the time limit and not lose too much time, and live to fight another day. Like
Get in
this.
the bus. Get in the bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's yeah. Pace myself, have a good, have a good time. Eat and drink, and I certainly want to continue racing, but I know the challenge.
Talk about your Maserati.
Yeah, but I need to pay. I need to pace my. Do some wheelies at the back, and and wave at the crowd, and maybe take a flag for 100 yards, and just get in under the time limit. Um,
For sure, for
that's one
sure.
of those. It's just one of those seasons. There's some seasons that you can go on the offensive, and right now, just kind of the way that things are and the way that things are shaping up, it's still very difficult to do business
Yeah.
the way that we would traditionally do business. Where you're just like proactively trying to build things for people, or you know giving people options about different bikes that they could ride or things that we can build for them.
Yeah.
it's still one of those years where like, well, this is available, this is not available. Maybe we can do this for
Uh,
you. How about a used bike? You're like, that.
yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it really is a lot of that. It's like,
Sure.
it's like,
Sure.
hey, if you don't, your bike is still really good. Let's patch this thing. Let's keep it going. And, next year, maybe we can go for that Dura-Ace equipped carbon fiber bike that you've been dreaming of. Because right now,
Ooh.
trying to put that together right now it's going to be a hodgepodge of stuff, and getting a full Grupo. Well, you might be able to score the Grupo, online somewhere, bring that to me. If you can get the frame, if we can get a frame, we might be able to build a
Yeah.
bike, but we're going to have to sub a handlebar and maybe a different seat. And, it's all stuff like that. Nothing.
We might have to put on some microshift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We might have to put a 105 derailleur on there and a 105 cassette as opposed to the Ultegra stuff that you would, prefer to have. But,
Yeah.
that's the way you got to
For
build
sure.
it right now, and so it's,
Yep.
it's just, and in lieu of doing stuff like that, instead of, trying to do stuff kind of half-assed, or I'm just kind of, trying to get people to hold on to what they have, make do, and hopefully this winter and early spring we can kind of get back to building exactly what they want and getting them the bike that they want, not settling. So
Yeah.
yeah, unlike you, who was able to get exactly what you wanted, which is congratulations to you.
Well, you mean, to be fair, thank you.
Uh-huh.
But to be fair, it was not the easiest going thing.
No.
Like I had to, I definitely spent, not a sad story, but I definitely spent a good couple months in waiting, like
Mm-hmm.
looking around. Part
Yeah.
of it was like an analysis paralysis. I was looking at all kinds of bikes, but then when I like started clicking through screens, whatnot, like I realized, oh, they don't have any of those bikes, or they have a size 46 or whatever. I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, okay. But yeah, no, I definitely very fortunate to be able to eventually get the bike I wanted, because I know that these it's not the case for a lot of people, especially with parts and
Mm-hmm.
all that. So and then I was able to actually kick up that state single speed, which was sweet too. I love to ride that little thing around. So it's a good time. I definitely went without a single bike for quite a while, all the winters. So it was a lonely period, Joe. But happy to be riding now. And I got out. We've had this crazy weather, 100 degrees or so, real feel plus in Chicago, hit with this heat wave, like a lot of the country, really, which is kind of crazy. But
Yeah, we've
yeah,
had
I got it.
we've had temperatures here what in the hundred. Well, we hit about
Yeah.
100 yesterday, and we're high
Yep.
90s today. And I think that weather's going to
Whew.
hold this week.
Yeah,
Um,
it's gonna go down a little bit, but it's still gonna be very hot, and
hmm
it'll go back up again as well. And I was just gonna say I did get out for a nice spin. I was definitely sweating bullets the whole time, but I got out for a nice couple hours and change on Sunday.
Oh, nice.
No, excuse me, Monday, the holiday, Juneteenth, we had off. I got out for a nice spin. It was super hot, but I took it like super, super chill. I was like literally just pedaling along and stopped for a bunch of water at one place and a Gatorade, and just really took my time. I had a lovely ride. It was super hot, and honestly, I normally wouldn't even go out in that kind of heat normally, but I'd been hydrating like all morning and just like taking it super easy and slathered on my SPF 100,
Yeah.
and I got out in some casual kind of biking wear and just had a really nice ride. It was just good to get out. But yeah, I'm gonna get out tomorrow. That's the plan
Oh, cool.
for just a little bit, and then yeah, hopefully it's a short week because of the holiday for us. So work's been pretty busy, but I definitely plan to get out for a spin Friday, and then at the weekend hope to do a couple rides and hopefully get in some decent mileage
Well,
and
Danny,
kind of keep the momentum going a little bit.
what's happening in Chicago this weekend, Danny, don't you?
Oh, wait
Saturday.
a second. Wait a
Oh,
second.
it's my
Uh,
favorite ride of the year, Danny.
oh, wait a second.
hmm
The naked bike
The
ride?
World Naked Bike Ride. World
Is it
Naked Bike
Saturday?
Ride is Saturday, Danny.
Are you
Oh,
are you doing it? Are
oh
you
yeah,
doing it?
yeah, yeah. I do it every
Are
year.
you serious?
Yeah, oh yeah. It really is my favorite. my favorite ride of
Oh
the year,
my
my favorite
God.
casual ride, my favorite kind of bike community ride of the year.
Very underlined casual.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's super casual, Danny. Super cash.
It doesn't get much more casual
No,
than
no,
naked.
it does not. It does not. I mean, and
Um,
and so, and let me explain. I do show every year. I'm the guy who shows up, and I'm like, oh my, what's going on here? Is this a ride? What are you people doing? Oh, you mind if I tag along? I'm just in from out of town. I had no idea there was a naked ride going on. So
oh gosh.
I tend to be fully clothed at that ride. Or just, yeah. I mean, I'm not fully exposed as some people are.
Maybe you'll take one button down from the
Yeah,
collared
yeah.
shirt,
I mean, I'm
perhaps
certainly,
something like that.
yeah, as casual as I'm going to get. But I'm a professional, Dan. I can't be. I'm kind of like
Oh yeah.
I'm there I'm there to fix help someone who might be in duress or something. I can't be. I can't be caught literally with my pants down at
Yeah,
an event like
well,
that. Um,
I've always wondered like how you ride a bike, especially if you're a guy, but we won't even go into the
oh,
details.
Danny,
Um,
there's no wondering. You can come and see it for yourself on Saturday night here in Chicago.
I kind of have. I'm just, but I always wonder. Part of maybe I'm just weird, but I always think like, what happens if someone gets a good photo of you and that thing just goes online and it'll
Oh,
never come down? And I'm like, I
no.
don't know. Maybe I need to get in a little better shape
Yeah,
first.
no, they're definitely out there, Danny. I mean, I do peruse the after photos, and
uh,
there are a few of
next
me
thing,
fully dressed amongst the crowd there, and
next thing you know, you're on the front page of the Chicago Tribune.
sure, yeah, because especially, yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely, but
Joe Gaspar of
oh,
Willow Springs.
I know. Well, you know what?
Beep.
When that ride, I mean, I think they're probably in the 13th or 14th iteration of that ride here in the city. But when
Hmm.
my first encounter of that ride was I was working down in the city. I was working in a bike shop down in the city. The first two or three versions of that, and
Hmm.
I remember, going down to do the ride and running into customers. A lot of my customers at
Oh,
the
hello.
at the yeah, because it was the first few was a lot of bike messengers and kind of real like bike. It was a tight knit community back then, especially
Yeah,
the ones that were willing to take all their clothes off and ride around the city
yeah,
naked. It was
for
pretty.
sure.
It was not it wasn't the sprawling group it is these days. I mean,
Right.
these days it's huge. I mean, it's thousands of people. It's become quite the event. But
Wow.
back then you kind of knew. I mean, you knew the core group of those people. They were advocates. They were. I mean, there were very
You're like,
a lot of
there's Steve and Alice and
of them,
Janet.
a lot of familiar faces, Danny. A lot, and too familiar after the event. They became very familiar to me, and so the ride and I'm the guy from the bike shop, right? So everyone's coming, they're, hey man, what's going on? And so, it's like kind of half
High
hug.
five.
Yeah, hi. I was like, whoa, and and male and female. I mean, there was a lot of there was a lot of acknowledgement amongst the crowd. But the weirdest part came afterwards. Like the weeks after the event, because they would come into the store to buy a tube or get a flat fixed, and you're just like, wow, man, I know where all your tattoos are.
Yes, yes.
I know what kind of hairstyle you got. You know what I mean? And
All kinds
like
of things. Yeah.
I know way too much about. I know a lot about you now.
I know what kind of shape you're in right now.
Oh, all of that stuff. Yeah, you
You
look
can't
ripped.
hide.
You look ripped to me. But, you look good in a t-shirt. But let me tell you, buddy.
Yeah.
so,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
yeah, it was very.
That's
That was
funny.
interesting. Now that I'm not in the city, I mean, I don't run across as many people that I know. Although there every
Yeah.
once in a while you do, somebody shows up that you don't expect, and you're just like, whoa, man, it's just him in a sombrero. You're used to
Yeah.
see him. You're like,
I didn't
this.
recognize you with your clothes on. Thanks
Yeah,
for coming
yeah,
into the shop.
yeah.
So Joe, a couple of quick questions. So
Hmm.
one, so you said you're going to the event. Are you actually going to ride
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole course?
Yeah, I write it.
Okay, and then
It's a you know what and so the nudity apart, it's a beautiful ride. It's a beautiful ride. It's like the best ride of the year because
Okay.
you start in the Fulton Market area, if you know Chicago.
Yep. Yep.
So a thriving, party, bustling area. It wasn't, when this ride first started, that area was kind of
Right.
it was a dark, it was the meat packing district of Chicago, basically. A lot of
Yeah.
industry in that area and warehouses, and now it's just a thriving party scene down there.
Well, now it's like it's almost swung the other way. It's almost a tad. Well, it's just I don't want to say douchey, but it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely super upscale. I love going there for a couple specific places.
Yep.
Publican is one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
restaurants, but anyway, yeah, very upscale kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's where people go for like a night out.
Yep. And
A lot of folks, but it's definitely a nice area.
yeah, it's so it starts there. That's kind of west of
And
the Loop and west of downtown Chicago.
yeah, and SRAM is there, Google's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it's that kind of area. A lot of swanky hotels, kind of boutique hotels there, and so you start
Hmm.
there, and then you head. The ride will head east towards downtown Chicago, usually along Lake Street, or follow one of those streets, straight
Hmm.
into downtown Chicago, like State Street, Michigan Avenue.
Hmm.
You ride, from let's say Lake Street down Michigan Avenue to Oak Street, so all of Michigan Avenue, um, into Rush Street, and this is a Saturday night, so all of these areas are bustling, and you're in a
Wow, man.
you're
I
in a
think I got to do this ride.
oh yeah, I mean, and then you head up to Boys Town, you go down Lincoln to Boys Town, come
Wow,
back,
wow.
you do Wicker Park, you're doing, Chicago or Division, you're hitting every major party, party street in Chicago, bar scene in Chicago, and you're in a parade of
Nice.
naked people. And what's
Yeah.
kind of amazing, I mean, at some point, you're in this big group, which is a pretty, it's a boisterous group, a lot of music going on and people chanting
Yep.
and things. But
Hmm.
what's amazing is to see the crowds and what happens when the crowds will start running into the street and kind of checking out what's going on, and people are honking their horns because you're messing with traffic on a Saturday night. Um,
Yeah.
but people, I've watched people rip their clothes off on the side of the road. People that are just start taking their clothes off, Danny. And like people taking their clothes and start running amongst the bikes, and people
Oh my
running,
God.
flashing, in windows and apartments, just start taking their clothes off and, just start shaking in front of their windows or literally running out of their apartments naked, and that is the funniest. Like that's I mean, it's
That's
this,
wild.
yeah, it's the circus around the event. And, the hotter it is, and I think Saturday is going to be pretty
Oh,
hot.
yeah, man.
The rowdier and crazier it gets, and the bigger the
Yeah.
turnout. And so I can't wait. It's been, 2 years ago it was suspended. Last year it was kind of moved around, and it was a chilly
Mm.
night when they finally did
Oh,
it. I mean, it wasn't.
careful.
The weather was not very good, but I think we have prime conditions. It's Saturday night.
Oh,
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be nuts. I think
well,
it's going to
man,
be nuts.
I might talk to Sarah. Maybe we'll come out and do it. It sounds the route sounds amazing. I
Yeah,
know all those spots, and it sounds you normally wouldn't get to ride obviously
you
like that.
you never you
Um,
never get to ride. So I mean, and yeah, going back to that, I mean, just the ride aspect of it, just what you get to ride. Wicker Park, Milwaukee Avenue, Halstead, the
yep,
Boys Town area on a Saturday
Clark,
night.
yeah,
I mean, and just ride down the middle. I mean, riding down the middle of Michigan Avenue on Saturday
that's
night
great,
is just
man.
so much fun. I mean, it's just
I love it.
it's cool. All the tourists are out, and people just yelling and screaming, and I mean, it really,
Yeah.
because people can't, everybody's got phones out, and it's just,
Yes.
yeah, it's quite the scene. It's quite the scene.
Sounds like you're pumped, man.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
let me know your logistics
yeah.
and all that. I will definitely consider it. I'll break out the single speed and maybe Sarah and I will ride down and we'll do this ride.
Oh,
What
cool.
time does it start?
It's usually it's around sundown, around
Okay.
7:30 or so. It's always a
Okay.
little vague, that like
Yeah. Yeah.
they used to have a thing where you'd have to subscribe to a newsletter, and then they would,
Oh, like a
then
rave.
yeah, it had a rave feel to it, but it's gotten much more organized because and you have,
Yeah.
so the police are involved. It's such a big event that,
Yeah.
you have police, you have police at the front and the back. So it's a
Like critical
non-sanctioned,
mass.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a non-sanctioned sanctioned event. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a
Yep.
lot of cops on the ride, and it's too big
Yeah.
not to be protected by the police,
Yeah.
and the group that puts it on actually does a very good job. They have plenty of chaperones and people closing down intersections, and
Hmm.
it's a well put on event, free event.
Nice.
And so yeah, I'm a big supporter of it. It's fun, and the people that are out, it's always great, and even the response from people when you tell them that you're going down to do it. You learn a lot about people when you mention when you mention you're going down to do the naked ride. You
Yeah.
ooh.
That's yeah,
Yeah.
like that's funny. Yeah, well, either way we'll have a full report next week.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I will definitely. I don't really think I have anything planned Saturday evening, so it sounds
If you do,
great. It sounds
cancel it,
great.
Danny.
Yeah,
Cancel
yeah.
it.
No,
Find yourself a
I'll,
thong. Nobody knows who you are. You're welcome to come out. A sombrero, a Zorro, mask or something. I won't tell anybody who you are.
I'll have to surprise you, Joe. I
All
might
right,
just wear
I can't
I might
wait.
wear my PDM kit, just the top. We'll see what
Oh,
happens.
whoa, oh, all right.